Hey guys, it's about that time. Alrighty, so Miss Erin, you're the spotlight queen for today for coming up with
Oh
this
no.
topic for us. But
Yes.
welcome, guys.
Welcome. It's good to see
How's
you
it going?
guys. Thanks everybody for joining in with us today.
Karen, Izzy, and Aaron. Um, so we wanted to talk about and extend our thoughts from our grief and loss episode. So we decided today to do a part two because grief isn't just about death. So, Miss Erin, you had shared something on Facebook that was truly inspiring to me. I read it a million times over. Do you want to remind us all of what we're going to be talking about today?
Yes. So yeah, it was shortly after our last class or last stream where we talked about grief as far as death. I found this thing on Facebook that talked about, how grief isn't just for death. You can grieve. It gave us like some bullet points, and I'll read them off. The first one talks about friendships or relationships that have ended, losing your community, missing the certainty you once had, questioning your judgment, realizing who you once were, feeling lost and unanchored, or losing traditions you lived. And when I saw that on Facebook, it kind of hit me pretty hard. I was like, wow, there are a lot of things in my life and along my journey that I have grieved loss of, besides just people. A lot of friendships, just, going from being unwell to being well again. I had to even grieve my old self, even though I really didn't like my old self. But as I was starting to, my recovery journey, I had to release that old person and the old coping mechanisms and the things that I did and the people that I was with and the experiences that I had. And I knew that that was no longer going to be anything that I would have in my life again. So I had to go through the grieving process. And we talk about, the 5 stages of grief. A couple weeks ago, we talked about those. And even as we grieve friendships, relationships, traditions, all of those things I mentioned, we still have to go through those 5 stages of grief.
Yeah,
And I think
exactly.
it's great to highlight that too, because, a lot of people, a lot of us don't realize we're grieving things. Anything that you lose in your life outside of a person can also be grieved. So,
Yeah, and I think grief is a word that is really interchangeable. I feel like it's not, exclusive to like physical death. I feel like it just doesn't fit in a box either.
yeah.
Um, because every one of us take on what's the word I'm looking for? A different form of grief.
Mhm.
Depending on what you're going through, it could last months, it could last years. It's just depending on how you bottle that up.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think grief is necessarily depression either.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like grieving could be, heartbrokenness or, um, saying goodbye to something that you didn't want to say goodbye to. I
Right.
feel like there's so many roots that we could spread out this grief and loss because, you know, um, I mean, loss of a pet. I've gone through this so much in my life, and we some people look at them as a added family member, which is how I looked
Mhm.
at them.
Yeah, me
And
too.
to this day, even if it's been 10 years, I still, you know, sadly see people walking their animals reminds me of my lost beloved pet. And I'm just like stuck in that
Mm.
grief and grieving moment again.
Mhm.
Um, on the funny side, Taco Bell getting rid of their little potatoes with the
Oh,
cheese
I
and stuff.
know.
I had to grieve my loss of that
The
too.
Fiesta potatoes.
I mean, it's just little things, and us as humans, um,
Right.
we bottle everything up,
Mhm.
and sometimes your cup gets full and spills over.
Yeah, and everybody handles grief in different ways. We all have, like, they talk about the 5 stages of grief, but sometimes I don't even think they happen in that same order. I mean, you can experience depression first and then go into being to denial, and then, or you could start bargaining, I mean, it's such a huge arena of like things that we could discuss and that people can feel. And that's why it's great that we're going to be able to talk about that today.
Yeah. And I mean, has anyone had to deal with anything like, grief that's not indicative of death? I mean, has anybody, even the smallest thing, recently gone through any grief or loss? Izzy?
I mean, for me, it's, man, I miss those good old days as I was growing up. Every year up until I was about 20, we went to Puerto Rico, summers and winters. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. We just went. And now it's been about a good 10 years, and I haven't been able to go to Puerto Rico, my home in my heart, because see, I was born in the United States, but I was raised in Puerto Rico. So like most of the majority of all my memories are Puerto Rico. So sometimes I sit back and reminisce about that time where, oh yeah, jumped in a plane, went to Puerto Rico for 3 months, went to Puerto Rico for a month. And then I'm like, oh, and then I get sad. And then I just want to kind of go back to those moments in my mind where I'm back there, And I think that the pet grieving hits home for me because I love the dogs we've had, and we've lost quite a few in a span of 10 plus years, that I actually go back thinking about that too, like how good they were and how much they really are an extension of a family, So it's like, there's so many different examples. I mean, childhood friends too. Some that have just kind of ran off the Richter scale. Like I have my friend Chino, Karen, hadn't seen him in like 7-8 years. I don't even know where he's at, but all I can do is just hope and pray that everything's good with him, So it's like you said, it's an arena. It's a huge spectrum of grief. It's just all depending on the person. It doesn't ever go in a certain, direction. It goes like the stock market, up and down.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, like the first example you gave kind of is one of the ones that I sent you guys on that thing. It talked about losing traditions that you loved. And I can relate to that in so many different ways. I come from a very big family, my mom and my dad's side, right? And we've always been very close, and we did a lot of things together, and we had traditions like Thanksgiving every year was at my childhood home that my mom sold, 4 or 5 years ago. And I miss that. I miss going and like knowing that like every holiday we were always going to be together. That's difficult because now we're older and we've got our own kids, and like, we all have our own lives, and we're kind of just really falling into our place, which is great. And we all are very supportive of each other, but I miss that, doing those things and like having those traditions that we do. And without having all the extra stuff, it's like the innocence of being a child. Like I grieve that as well. Yeah, like there was just a point in time where, I had that rose-colored glass and everything was just really, really great. And I grieve about that sometimes too. And I just noticed Terry said something about as she gets older, she has to grieve the loss of things she never did and will never do or can never do again. And oh my God.
Yeah,
right?
we were going to touch base on that. I'm so glad, Terry, you brought that up. Fits into this, I guess, chit chat perfectly.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
I mean, Erin, what you said really resonates with me because my mother passing, I want to say it's about 7 years now. And, parents can have that influential glue. And I feel like she was the binding that kept our family together. Wow. And, not just grieving her death and getting over that and, mourning her, it's little things like Christmas at home with your parents, you know, your grandkids, spending time with them. You know, I've had to grieve all these things that, you know, my kids will never be able to do with their grandparent. Things they'll never get to experience with her. Things she could have taught them that I feel like she left me too early. And I feel like I didn't, you know, get the full force of what she was trying to teach me as well. So that completely resonates with me in my whole heart, because I still suffer from that. I wish my father and I were closer, but I feel like, you know, also my mother's passing affected our relationship a little bit.
And like what Terry said, I mean, when I spoke about grieving my old self, and, you know, when I started my recovery journey, I think about the loss of things I never did and will never do or can never do again. So that time of my life that I spent so trapped in my unwellness, I cannot get those years back. I cannot get that time back. And that's challenging, and still is very challenging for me on a daily basis to think about, you know, the lost time and the lost opportunity and the things that I'll never have the opportunity to do again, because those years are gone. Not because I want to be unwell again, but just because I wish I could have done things a little bit different. You know, I had such high hopes for my life. And, you know, then it was like, all of a sudden it's gone. And now here I am 30 years old almost, and it's gone.
Yeah. I think I've said this before in a couple of episodes back too. You know how I've lost the majority of my family. I went from this huge family. We're talking about like over 100 people gathering to 10, 15. And having to understand that life goes on, you know, and to realize that I am getting of an age where I'm going to have to make my own big family like my grandparents did. And I think that's something that I strive for and think about every day too. You know, trying to get everything to a point where it's comfortable and we could all just get together again one day. And you know, I could grieve all day, you know, and I think most of us can. But I want to upgrade my grief, you know, if that makes any sense. Kind of like making it bigger all over again. Kind of trying to find myself and find everybody else to come be with me. Because that's kind of how I saw my grandparents do it. You know, they didn't really go looking for people. People always went looking for them. And once they were gone, that's pretty much why we're all spread out through that United States now. So it's like damn near impossible, but to get together and do a family thing again. But all in good faith. That's all I can do is really dream of this really huge, you know, event where we're all back together and doing the same thing we used to do, but in a better way.
Yeah, and that's so important, right? So like even when we grieve the loss of death, so the death of somebody in our family or a friend or whatever, we try to keep their memory alive. And just like that, we can keep traditions and the memory of how things were, how we want them to be still alive, so that, you know, we can upgrade, like you said. I like that.
Yeah, because like when I lost myself to active addiction, you know, when I was really into the addiction part, I kind of had to come to the realization that I lost myself, then I got to find myself. And then once I found myself, I just upgraded myself. That's about as good as I can say it. And keeping that faith in me, God, and family. That's really a biggie for me. You know, I pray once a day. I sometimes reminisce, you know, about the grief in my life, the loss in my life, and everything. And then I look in the mirror with my positive affirmations and tell myself, you know, today is going to be a good day. And you are a good person. And you're going to do the best you can today and every other day. And then just continue on down that path to where the grief doesn't go into a negative aspect. It kind of keeps trying to go towards the positive, and it's tough. That's probably one of the toughest things that I've gone throughout my life, and I'm going to be 31 in December.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And I
definitely.
think,
And Terry, thank you for being there, because honestly, you've been a great individual to have in our lives and in our children's lives too.
yeah, and I think I can add to what you were saying, Izzy. I mean, you know, while we were in our unwellness, you know, all that time lost with our children due to certain things. And I noticed, you know, one of our skills now to kind of revert ourselves back to our, you know, better spot is, you know, we're trying to make up that time with our children and not sitting there mourning the time we lost. We're gonna, you know, do better with our time, make sure that we spend that time, make sure we put back in and invest in our children for their future, if not for ourselves, for them. So I'm sure we can all, me and you can agree on that one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that when the babies came back home, I was overwhelmed with excitement. Excitement, fear. I was still in this place where I was grieving, even though they were home. I was like, you know, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I still do this. I wake up in the middle of the night and check all my doors, check on all my kids, kiss my kids, make sure they got blankets over them. And it's, I guess, my way of grieving the lost time, you know, and just doing better for them and for myself. And honestly, at the end of the day, that gives me solace. It warms my heart and soul to calm down that feeling, you know, because you get that little, how can I say, kind of like that little pressure, you know, kind of like a fear.
It's like literally a heavy chest. Yeah.
And then once you get done your routine, because that's what I've done with my grieving and everything that's happened. Once I'm done with my routine, I can lay down and I could watch TV. I could read article. I could read news without having to think, are my babies there? Are they safe? Is this? Is that? But then in the back of my mind, once I'm done with all this, I'm like, you're doing a great job. But because of what's happened with the trials and tribulations of life, it's my routine. It's my coping mechanism to make sure that everyone's safe, everything's done, and everyone's there.
Yeah.
So I want to check in with everyone who's watching with us and commenting. Izzy, would you like to let us know who's checking in?
Yeah, Sean Michael says, I lost my in-laws and my parents within 18 months.
Wow.
Hardest time of my life. I had to be strong for my kids. Also needed to work through my emotions. That's tough.
That is tough, right? You have to be, you know, you have your kids, you have to help them work through, you be strong for them, right? But then also, and then also having to work through your emotions is important too, because neglecting our emotions as we're grieving can be very toxic to our well-being.
Exactly.
You know? Oh, and he said he was in his early recovery, and wow, what a trying time that must have been to experience that much loss and then also have to really pick up the pieces and be strong for kids. And I'm kudos to you, Sean, for going through that, because I know that was not easy.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that with us. We really appreciate your feedback, because that lets us know, you know, there's people out there going through the same struggles we are.
Yeah, just like my father has always been a really big influence in my life, and I've always looked up to my dad. And when I saw my dad for the first time when I was younger, grieving and looking down in a hole and his mother's being put in it, was the very first time I ever saw my dad cry. And as soon as he saw me seeing him cry, I was removed out of the equation. He didn't want me to see that, because he wanted to be strong for the family and for me and for my sisters and then so on and so forth. But he bounced back. He bounced back in his time and all on his own. And that's not something that I think that everybody can be accustomed to, doing it all on your own. But when, let's see, my dad has buried my mom's 4 brothers, because on my mom's side of the family, they're pretty much lived in impoverished, circumstances. They didn't come from money. So my dad had to get the money together, to bury them. And then her sister, and then her other sister. And then my dad had to bury his mom, bury some more brothers. And then the last one for him, which I know he was internalizing a lot because I didn't see it until he got home. Once my brother was buried, I could see the sadness. I could feel it. And really, it's tough. It's something that I've seen a lot of death too, and it's changed me. And grieving it in a positive way has really changed the aspects of the way that I look at death and the grieving process and the loss process. And part of all my recovery is to look at everything as a whole.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm in a good place in my recovery, I can pick up where I left off. I got my big bubble and all the stuff's in there. And then I just work on small things inside of my bubble, but ultimately it's still in the bubble.
It's like a big pizza. We got slices, right? And we're going to add some toppings. I want a little bit of that, a little bit of this. I can pick up where I love that reference. And it's so true.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah. Because you know how they say in cooking, you can always add more. You can't take away.
Yeah.
So that is important. Miss Terry said, I lost almost all my family, brother, both parents, and I have one sister. I miss not being close and always accepted by extended family. Well, we know you're extended and loved by us so much. I call her more than my own father. So love to Miss Terry.
Yeah. And that's something like one other thing, missing the certainty that you once had. She talks about not being close and accepted by her family. I mean, that's a certain, she was guaranteed that safety in those relationships and in that family, and losing that, you grieve the loss of their life. And then also that certainty that you had within your family. So yeah.
I mean, I couldn't say it better myself. That was perfect, Aaron.
Yeah, fun fact. Terry was there in our worst of times. She was there. And we were able to really think about everything that was going on in a whole before and after. And I could always say that she's always been one of our really good supports. And if we ever picked up the phone and called her, she would pick up, or text. She'd always be there.
Everybody needs a Terry in their life.
And that's the great thing about having those positive supports, and having that in your life is, I think, one of those most valuable things. It's kind of like a gem or a ruby or an opal. It's just like, in the world that we're in now, things have changed so much, but those positive supports that have stayed positive and still are positive in your life, that stay there, you gotta treat them preciously. You really do.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And Mr. Edward Cole is checking in with us. You're fortunate you have children. I have none, which I messed that up. But although we can't change our past, we learn from it to change our present to make a better future. Very insightful. I love that.
Yeah.
And then Sean Michael said, just helped a client of mine through the grieving process. That's why I love being a CPSS. We do too. It's
Peer
one of the most
support in the
rewarding
house.
jobs in the world. I don't think I could go back to nursing. I have a nursing degree. I don't use it. There's so
I don't
many
think I
things-
couldn't do any. I don't know. As soon as I found peer support, my life changed.
it completely
it.
did a whole 360 of mine, and it keeps me well. I just can't imagine doing anything else. Mr. Edward Cole checked in again. I have two, but after losing my mom to cancer, my attitude toward death changed.
Yeah.
Yes, very
That
much so.
happens. Yeah.
I mean, they say grieving starts with denial, right? But personally, I think that's a good thing, because why do we have defense mechanisms, installed in all of our I guess, brains? I mean, they're there to protect us. So what's everyone's thoughts on that?
You think you said it perfectly. So our brain is designed like just with like trauma. I use trauma as an example all the time because I have a lot of significant trauma that I have experienced that I cannot remember. So my brain has literally gone into defense mode and it has blocked out my memory of that time. I know it happened, but I used to be able to give you a whole spiel from start to finish of the event. And now I can't piece it together anymore. And that's my brain's way of protecting me. Right. So, and like you said, denial it's a defense mechanism. We don't want to believe it. We don't want to accept that it's happened, that somebody's gone, or that something is gone, or a relationship is gone, or whatever it is. I mean, that's completely normal. It really is. It really is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I feel from these type of grief and losses that aren't, totally attached to death, I think those kind of losses loop.
Yeah.
I feel like, it's not just a path. I feel like we go around full circle and we keep on going on this, little track.
Oh, yeah.
Like a merry-go-round.
Yeah. And do you think there's a better path so that people that are, dealing with these types of grief and losses to kind of choose a better path?
I feel like no. I think that the most helpful advice that anybody had given me or I could give anybody else in return is that, what we do, emotions and all the things that are attached with grief, the grieving process are just emotions, right? And it's healthy. It's normal for us to feel emotions. It's normal for us to go through these things, right? So it's just more of what we do with those emotions that makes it different. So I think to early recovery and some things that I had to begin grieving then, and then how I grieve them now, because it is like a loop. It comes back around. I'm re-grieving. Well, not re-grieving, but I am still grieving some things that just when I think, I'm good and I've let this go, there it is. It comes right back. But I'm in a healthier state of mind and I'm in a healthier place now than I was 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. So I just think that it's really important for us to be, be real with ourselves and real with our emotions and keep doing healthy things, using our emotions in a healthy way. Isolation, I feel like when you grieve, we all kind of just want to be alone. Like we feel so sad and just so like alone already in our minds. And it's like, we want to isolate. And while I think that a little bit of isolation is completely fine, because I am a fan of isolating, it's just, it's just having a backup plan or having the support system or still using that isolation time to better yourself and heal yourself.
Yeah. And I think I did so much extensive trauma-based therapy when I was actually coming out of my unwellness. She gave me 4 things and, some of them didn't work for me, but the first thing I had to understand with myself is understand that my heart was broken.
Yeah.
And then I had to recognize, because my heart is broken, I need time to grieve.
Yeah.
So I feel, that's perfect for us to shut down and be with ourselves for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if we continue it on to a certain point, I feel like that's really unhealthy.
Right. Yeah. So if we need to be alone to grieve, or if we need to be isolated to grieve, what are we going to do when we're ready to stop isolating? What's next? So it's like in that isolating time, we can be sad. We can eat a whole bunch of chocolate. We can cry. We can not shower for a couple of days. I mean, whatever. Okay. So then what happens when we're done? What happens when we want to get up?
I go into a positive direction.
Yeah.
It's okay to, I mean, that's why batteries have negatives and positives, right? But they work together at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
that's a good analogy. I like
that's
that.
a great analogy. Yeah.
Evening it out and going into the positive. And if you feel like you need to go back into that negative aspect of the grief, go ahead. That's perfectly healthy. That's something that is perfectly normal, Let's see an example. My mom, I always had to see her grief, my dad being in prison. And then as I got older, I started grieving. But my mom always made it a point to get us to see our father, and be there for our dad. And then as I was growing up, I kind of started to realize that all those negative aspects went into a positive direction, because the minute my dad came out of jail, I was able to do all those things that we missed out on. Playing baseball.
Great example, yeah.
Playing baseball, going on vacation. Because while my dad was in jail, we really didn't go on vacation because my mom was always grieving. She was sad inside.
Right.
So she was constantly thinking about, is my husband okay? Is my children going to be okay when he gets home? All those different aspects. But then my dad just went into 2.0 mode. He went straight into the positive and took care of all of those fears, those fears that she had, and those fears even that I'm sure he had. Because as I've gotten older, my dad's been able to open up more to me about how he felt about everything that's going on and the time he lost. And the reason why I never had to worry about anything, all that time that I wasn't really thinking about all that, he was. And he went ahead and just upgraded it and turned it into a positive, great thing. But what I didn't realize later on when I started getting into active addiction is that all of that was trauma, and I didn't put myself in a place, or I didn't have the tools to put myself in a place of wellness. So then it went trauma without any treatment, no treatment for myself. So automatically then you got your negative aspect of friends that bring you, they bring you needles, they bring you alcohol, they bring you powder, they bring you marijuana, and they tell you, oh, this is an easy way out. But the problem is that's only temporary.
Right.
Yep.
That temporary, it turns into something that's going to go into a downward spiral. So all that, if you had anything positive, it's like going into a tornado. It goes through the top, comes out negative. And you're pretty much stuck in a place where either you're going to find yourself, because my dad always told me there's a couple things that happen in life. Either you're doing right, you're doing good, not only for yourself, but your family, or you're doing wrong. And when you're doing wrong, it depends on the levels, because there's different levels of that too. You're either going to end up in prison, or a prisoner of your own body, your own mind too, or you're going to go into you're either going to die or be in prison. Really, I mean, and that was the whole premise of living in Chicago too. I mean, still to this day, I'm seeing so much death and so much stuff in an environment where I was raised, and I was able to get out of there. And I thank God every day that happened. Excuse me. Like, I grieve living in Chicago. I love it there. My wife loves it there. We have a good time out there. But can I sit there and live there and raise my children to go through the same things that I went through? I don't want that. That's like see, because I've been shot, stabbed, ran over, left for dead. And I've been in hospital beds. I can't tell you how many times because of stupidity of my own. And all I can think about is, now is how could I have, if I had the mindset I have today, back then, I don't think that a lot of that trauma would have been there. But it makes me who I am today. So I can't negate that all those things that happened didn't build me up to be the person that I am today.
Right. Absolutely.
So Miss Terry's checking in. She says sometimes denial or disassociation from an event are definitely a way of protection. And I believe when we are ready to see and experience the truth, it happens, as long as we are willing to go through the process. Exactly. So I kind of wanted to touch base. Some losses are more predictable, say like retirement or ending a relationship, right? So how do we prepare for this? Trick question.
Yeah.
It is a trick question because not every baby's born the same.
True.
What did he say?
Not every baby's born the same.
So we all deal with things differently.
But has anybody ever thought, I had a long thought in my head about this, when I'm sitting there isolating myself, thinking to myself, is it okay to grieve in advance if we know something's coming?
Ooh, yes. Well, I guess it's okay. I'm just thinking in my head now. When
like
I was in the relationship with the father of my children and things had started to get abusive, right? I had to like prepare and pre-plan. Like I knew the relationship was over before I actually walked away from him. And so, yeah, you can definitely grieve something before it happens. I guess it really just starts with once you know that something is gone or going. I think that you can. Yeah, the only thing I would have done different in that situation was, like I said earlier, have a plan B. What am I going to do next? How am I going to deal with this? Instead of running headfirst into substances and unwellness to make myself feel a little bit better. But yeah.
And the only reason I thought of this is because I'm married. This is my second marriage. My first one didn't end very well. Mm-hmm. And, I had filed for divorce and I knew I didn't want it to be an ugly process. So before I knew it was completely over, I made sure to grieve because I knew which direction it was heading in. Yeah. So once that whole divorce had gone through, I wasn't sad about it. I was actually kind of finding myself and creating myself a better path to be on instead of, turning to something else.
Right.
So just a little thought for everyone.
For sure. Yeah. For sure.
But I did come across something that I thought was amazing. Things had been in the news lately about Texas and abortions, and it's a sensitive subject. So we're not here to, put our bias, how we feel about it. But has anybody heard of, and I hope I don't mess this up, disenfranchised grief?
No.
So I had heard nothing about this.
Can I hit up a lifeline?
I'm gonna read off the definition because I had a little trouble understanding this.
Okay.
So disenfranchised grief, also known as hidden grief or sorrow, refers to any grief that goes unacknowledged or unvalidated by social norms. The kind of grief is often minimized or not understood by others, which makes it particularly hard to process and work through. So we're talking about things like abortion, infertility, estrangement from a parent, people dying. You're friends with people online and they pass away. You didn't really know them in person, but you sympathize and grieve for them because you had some sort of relationship with them. Make sense?
So I'm looking, I totally cheated. I had to look on Google real quick. And I just typed in examples of disenfranchised grief. And the first one says loss due to a stigma. So yes, I guess now I have a name for this feeling that I have. As a former IV drug user and heroin user, I think about every single time I see a name of somebody who overdosed and lost their life. It's like, I don't even have to know who they are, but just because of the stigma and just because of the relationship that I had with drugs and that they probably had with drugs and that comment, you know what I mean? Like, it hurts so bad. And it's, yeah, you can grieve that. I mean, you
I'm
think of
smelling a part 3, Aaron.
part 3. We could do a
Vindicators
whole
part 3.
thing. Yeah, and then it talks about, you know, and you think of other stigmas. I don't even want to get into it really, but with what's happening in the world, yeah, like abortion laws, racial stuff. I mean, I grieve for a lot of different things that aren't socially recognized and normal. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel it's unfair to draw out these stigmas when these
Yeah.
people need just as much compassion, just as
Absolutely.
much support as something that isn't looked upon as a stigma.
Wow.
I think the reactions people give can leave people ashamed and embarrassed.
Absolutely.
And those sort of things, I feel like it's a trickling down effect. It could lead to drug use, self-harm, because they are ashamed and embarrassed of how society portrays these stigmas.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we should be
They're
giving
the
our whole
outcasts.
hearts to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. People are outcasted because they are not what society deems normal. I mean, what is normal? You know,
Exactly.
like
That's the toughie. That's the
who
toughie.
is to
When I was
say?
at Anuvia, man, when I was at Anuvia, it was something different. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
at first, it went into the drug aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the trauma aspect. And then they started telling us about, like, at the end there, they started telling us about some people's coping mechanisms, which could be eating, which could be over, what's it called? When you go to the gym too much, you know, things like that. Like that are
Okay, I know what
too
you're talking
much
about.
is bad.
Yeah.
So it's like, why? If we're supposed to be concentrating on certain things, why are you gonna sit there and tell me I can't eat 3 pieces of candy because I wanted to? So you telling me I could only eat one?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I totally get where you're coming from. I do.
No, I'm just looking at more now. Death from suicide. Death from suicide. I mean, hello. What, people think that because somebody ended their life that they're not worthy of, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I mean,
like
wow,
Robin Williams.
right. I mean, you just, yeah, like instead of, I'm not even gonna get into it, y'all. This will be a whole hour and a half, 2-hour conversation. But
yeah, I think it's something we'll have to add on to again.
Wow.
But I mean, I feel like these stigmas have really have made people so cold and unfeeling towards, you know, these certain type of people that are going through these certain type of things. Oh, this person killed themselves. Well, they would still be here if you like helped them, or things like that.
Or they did it to themselves.
Exactly. And
come on now, what is that?
Exactly. And I'm kind of like, no, we need to validate their trauma, validate their feelings, show them compassion. Because that person committed suicide for a reason.
Yeah, but it's kind of, I'm starting to think about, like, you know how some of my friends, family members, brothers, like Ethan, up in Pennsylvania, he ended up having an accidental overdose. I mean, how can you know, kind of differentiate that from, you know, suicide? For him, it was an accident. For another person, it wasn't. So what's the middle to that?
Yeah.
There shouldn't be there
Yeah.
shouldn't be this big stigma in between both of them when loss is loss.
Loss is
Period.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that was somebody's brother, somebody's uncle, son, or daughter, whichever way. It goes both ways, but there shouldn't be, oh, well, this person did this, I'm going to feel this way about it. Or this person did this, I'm going to feel this way about it. It should just be all, I have a heart, I'm a human being, and somebody just lost their life. Or I just lost a best friend of 20 years of friendship, not even, leaving this earth, but a friendship. And then all of a sudden it's not there anymore. That's tough on its own too, because then all those things that like me and my brother, me and my nephew, we have this thing I call every other day. How you doing? Everything good? Or I sit down with my brother and talk to him and ask him, hey, how's work's going? How's this? If I didn't have that with them, I'm gonna be in grief. I'm gonna be in pain. I'm gonna be sad. But it's obviously gonna be something different. Than there's so many different levels of grief, and I'm glad that we're doing this. Because it could go in so many different directions. It just depends on how you want to cope with it and what your positive supports are. That at the end of the day, that's what for me it is.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned too, coming through my recovery and wellness, is associations with my vicarious trauma. I feel like opening my heart up more and being more accepting of different things like this has actually, prepared me, and has given me more of a, I guess, like Aaron says, those rose-colored glasses to be able to see on the other side all these people that are going through these things. And I feel like that's where it comes down to education.
Right.
And
because education is so important. So important.
Exactly.
And while we may not understand everybody else, I mean, we don't have to understand to
show compassion.
Right. I mean, we're still
to just be human beings.
Yes. Just
exactly.
Be kind and be willing to, if you don't know something, learn about it, read about it, ask somebody about it. You know what I mean? Like, broaden your spectrum, your horizon, and just, it'll all make us better people in the end.
True. And that's how I feel about, and this is probably going to be a different segment, being uneducated about my feelings and my abilities to be able to voice those things without going into a negative aspect.
That's a good one.
If I would have had the mindset, the tools that I have today that were given to me after the fact, after all the trauma, not only that I caused, but that I caused to myself. So if I would have understood all of these things beforehand, I think that I would have been able to go into a different direction. But guess what? It would have made me who I am today.
Right. True that.
So you know how we close these things down. So any advice, any coping tips, anything we could give to our viewers, our loved ones, our family members, our friends that could be watching or will watch this later. I'm going to start it off with seek help from those that understand. Our PRN warm line. There's also other things, supports from family, those types of good things. Make sure to check into those things, because one little conversation can truly save somebody's life. If you're compassionate, you make sure that you keep yourself vulnerable for them to be able to see to you. And I don't think I could elaborate on that much more.
I know. And just to piggyback off what we said before, just educate yourself. We have Google, we have all these different resources. I mean, you can I just now, while we were doing this, I just typed in disenfranchised grief and I'm looking at it and I'm seeing all these things and I'm able to relate them and put a name to my feelings and from these certain experiences that were just going unacknowledged. So yeah, I mean, educate yourselves, guys. You know, reach out to somebody. We're here at PRN Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. Yeah. And we're having classes like this one, but it's live, you know, things like that. Just come over and hang out with us. I mean, you can get a lot from one little conversation, and we would love to have you and to meet you guys. So
yeah, and also a couple of other things that, you know, really helped me was create your own morning ritual. For me, it was writing a letter to my mom, telling her goodbye. You know, pictures, things that keep you inspired of the happy memories. And don't be afraid to ask for what you need.
Right.
Don't be afraid. If you shut down, you're just going to stay shut down.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I'm so
I didn't say nothing. I got my hand up.
Oh, you
You're not allowed to talk. Just kidding.
All right, go ahead, Izzy.
No, what helped me is meditation. And it's something that at first, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be boring.
Yeah, it's weird at first.
Yeah. Meditation and music therapy. Some good old music, not any of that heart thumping like rap and all that other stuff. Even though I do like it because I like all different types of genre of music, but like something like jazz or classical music, something to like just ease my mind and soul and body and just sit there and be in that moment. That's something that I like to do.
Love
and
that.
You opened it up perfectly for me. Thank you, honey. Remember, guys, check us out on Facebook. We have our PRN monthly calendar on there. There is a wide variety of courses that touch base on everything, and my family will keep touching base on all aspects of family. So be sure to comment down below if there's something you would like us to do a show on and discuss as a family. So with that being said, you guys, the welcome desk is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The number is 704-390-7709. Miss Kim will make sure to get us any messages, or if you would like to speak to us, that is the number to call. We also have the warm line if you would like to talk to someone, free, confidential. They are there
24/7.
Yes.
No judgment.
No judgment.
Yes. And these are all people with lived experience that have gone through all aspects of life. And you are more than welcome to call. It is 833-390-7728. And that is it for this week of My Family. I loved seeing you guys, and I can't wait till next Thursday. Love you guys.
Love y'all. Bye.